You might be an Islamic scholar, you might be a YouTube star, but the jihad is coming for you, no matter who you are. Ignoring it won't make it leave. They just keep coming, bro. So it's best to know what they do and say. They love it when you don't know. And that's why we have David Wood with us tonight for another thrilling episode of This Week in Jihad, so that you can hear the news that the establishment media does not dare to tell you. Welcome, David. How are you?
How you doing, Robert? Yeah, it's always a great day when I think you've done a couple lines of your poem, and I think you're done, and then there's more.
There's always more.
Someone could just make someone for their own channels could just make video compilations of your poetry.
After a while, it would be epic. It would be of epic length.
Wouldn't it be cool if you put out like a book of poetry, like Alfred Lord Tennyson back in the day, and it's just
Yep, the Tennyson of Jihad. That's it. All right, we got a lot of jihad.
Hey,
yes.
since side note, since you have poetry skills, for many years I've had the idea to make a book a children's book titled A is for Aisha, Z is for Zainab, Learning the Alphabet with Muhammad's Atrocities or something like that.
Oh, I love it. That's great.
But the whole thing is like children's poetry, but you're going through all the messed up stuff about Muhammad. Put that out
Dr.
as a children's book.
Seuss.
Yeah, Dr. Seuss like book, but like actual, get an illustrator to make all the pictures and make a really cool children's book.
I wonder if Bosch Fawston could draw in that style.
Ooh, yeah, man, that's a good idea.
This is getting real possibilities here. Mm-hmm. All right, a lot of jihad, ladies and gentlemen. None of it from New York. So I just want to say one thing. Everybody's saying, "Hey, I want to hear that accent again." Wait, but I say what? What do you want me to do? Go do jihad in Manhattan? I can't do it. There ain't no jihad in New York this week, so forget about it. You know what I'm saying? Anyway.
Hey, Robert.
Yes.
But this, I'll be quick with this because this is off topic. But many years ago, this is when Nabil was still a Muslim. But we were on a trip and we went by this Italian restaurant, and there were like 20 Italians standing out in front of the restaurant. I don't know if they're waiting to go in, or they just came out or were chatting. But I go, "Hey, Nabil, watch this," and I go, "Hey, Tony!" And like 3 dudes turned around.
Yeah, you can do that. Go to the Greek church and say, "Hey, George." Anyway, okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's start. Shall we start with our ever popular stupid infidels? We got a variety of stupid infidels.
Can never have too many stupid infidels.
Indeed, there are so very many stupid infidels, and they just keep coming. Okay, we have a standard stupid infidel story here, that one we have heard many times before. As we have noted, David, so many of these news items, they just are exactly the same. They're interchangeable. And all you do is change the city, change the name, but they all say the same things. They do the same things. You know, sometimes I think, I've been tracking jihad for 20 years. We've been doing this show fairly often, almost weekly, and there's a danger, when you're talking about in the visual medium, David. I know you'll understand this because you being a movie mogul, you don't want to keep repeating. You don't want to keep doing the same things over and over again. That's how your show gets canceled. Mm-hmm. And yet, what do we got here but the same material over and over again? And so this one comes out of Strasbourg in France. And in Strasbourg, there was a man of the Islamic faith, and for some reason he produced a knife and began to assault random people on the street in Strasbourg while he was shouting something. David, what do you think, in light of the fact that we're risking getting canceled here for the sameness of our material. What could he have been shouting?
Yeah, I can't keep doing the same joke. I mean, imagine a comedian who just did the same joke all the time, right?
This
Pretty
is
soon
the problem.
everyone knows the joke.
What are we
But
gonna do? We need to hire
I don't
some
know.
new writers. You
Yeah, but
know?
at the same time, where it's also a news show, and you got to report the news. So and we got to
Yeah.
report it accurately. So I'm just going to go with a Allahu Akbar for 200, Alex.
Yes, unfortunately, that is what he yelled. He assaulted passersby, and he tried to stab one police officer, who actually did stab one police officer, cut him in the hand, as well as injuring him in the shoulder and the knee in the fight. Now, David, one thing about this is the police, after all this happened, the police are trying to figure out. You can see it coming. Why
A
on
motive?
earth?
A motive?
Yes. Why
Guys,
did he do
we're
this?
we're looking for a motive here. Is it here? Is it under here? We can't find. Nope. Sorry, we couldn't find any motive. We looked real hard.
Yep. Strange story out of Pennsylvania, a little bit closer to home. In Pennsylvania, one of the Beatles was being held. That is one of the ISIS, Islamic State Beatles, the four guys with thick English accents, and so they were out beheading in Syria and sowing all kinds of mayhem, and people started calling them the Beatles. The real Beatle, Ringo Starr, was quite upset when he heard about this. He said, we had nothing to do with violence. They shouldn't call themselves the Beatles. Actually, they didn't call themselves that at all. It was other people who called them that. But Ringo was incensed. He said, "Oh, you can't just call them the Beatles, you know." Anyway,
It's just. I don't mean to correct you, but it's Beatles.
the Beatles, you can't
Beatles.
call them. You can't say that. Not in Liverpool. Anyway,
Hey, jihadis, don't blow me up.
scream Allahu Akbar and make it better. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Allahu
Akbar! We got the ISIS Beatles going now, man. All right, Alexander. This man's name was not Alexander. His name is Alexander. Alexanda. Alexander Cote. And he was Beatle George, apparently. I don't know if he played a mean guitar, but that's, or if it gently wept, but nonetheless, that's what they called him. And he was being held in Pennsylvania's high security Canaan prison. But somebody wanted to check in on him recently, and they asked the Federal Bureau of Prisons, how he's doing, and they said, well, actually, he is not incarcerated in Pennsylvania Canaan High Security Prison. Nobody knows where he is. Did he escape? Was he spirited away somewhere? Is he informing for the feds, and so they have him in some more comfortable accommodations? Is he helping them figure out how to frame people who oppose jihad violence? I don't know. But Alexander, he ain't there. Very strange story. They lost a jihadi.
They lost an ISIS Beatle.
Yes. The lost Beatle. The sort of, I guess that makes him the Pete Best of the ISIS Beatles, actually.
Yes, that does.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, Pete Best was the best looking member of the Beatles, their drummer, and they got rid of him. And the Beatles say it was because he wasn't a good enough drummer, but Pete Best fans say it's because he was too good looking, and so they wanted a less good looking guy.
Well, I'll tell you, I know this story, and it's a little off topic, but you'll pardon me, David. I know if Pete Best is watching tonight, Pete, I know you love this show, but I got to apologize. But he really was a lousy drummer. If
Yeah,
you
and
hear the
Ringo
recordings,
Ringo is actually a top-notch drummer. So
yeah.
I
So
don't think I don't think they would have been the same if they hadn't made that power move.
I think it was a quality, a merit-based decision. Anyway, no jihad in it though, so we have to move on. It seems that Mark Green, representative from Tennessee, he's from Tennessee. Now, Mark Green, representative from Tennessee, he's in a little bit of hot water, David, because it turns out Mark Green is the Homeland Security Committee chair for the new House of Representatives coming in, the new Congress. Now, Mark Green, the Huffington Post was just enraged that he got picked for this position because they said he has a history of anti-Muslim comments. And what he said was, let's see, he said that there should not be Islamic indoctrination in the public schools. He said that if students are going to learn about Islam in the public schools, they should teach about the history of the Ottoman Empire and the assault of Islam out into the Levant and North Africa and into Constantinople. But he also said that he served a term in Iraq and that the Iraqis smelled funny. And that is one of the reasons why, and I think that is indeed a rude comment. We all smell funny to everybody else. You know, I remember I had a friend in college who came over from Kenya and said, well, the first thing I noticed about the Americans is that they stink. And it's just different food habits, different hygienic habits, and he just wasn't used to this. So, I think, well, I understand why he would say that. It's kind of a rude thing to say. But does this really mean, and this is what the Huffington Post is saying, that this man is a threat to Muslims? And that he should not serve as the Homeland Security chair? But I think, as far as the Islamic indoctrination in public schools, we have seen this all over the country, that public school materials teach a whitewashed version of Islam. They never talk about jihad. Often they even teach Islam as if it were fact. I remember a case I was an expert witness on out in California. Many years ago, these people sued the public school because the kids were having to fill in, there is no God but Allah and blank is his prophet. And there was no Muslims believe this. It was just stated as if this is the way it is. And so I think Mark Green's got a point. What do you think, David?
Yeah, and it's always interesting to see people's priorities, right? So here's a guy who said he had a problem with the smell when he was in Iraq. Say, okay, you and I both agree. That sounds like a jerk thing to say. Mm-hmm. Versus indoctrinating a bunch of kids with the ramblings of an illiterate 7th century Arabian caravan robber, where there's a disturbing correlation between kids who convert to this and kids who decide to slaughter unbelievers in the name of Allah. Mm-hmm. So you'd think, okay, this was in poor taste, but this is a really, 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 really bad and dangerous idea that actually not only gets other people killed, it gets the kids killed and put in prison and so on when they decide that Allah wants them to slaughter unbelievers in His name. And so just the idea that you would look at, okay, this group wants to teach kids a bunch of ridiculous nonsense to help them convert to Islam, versus a guy saying, hey, I was in a war and it smelled bad, and you say, that's the guy we have to get.
Yep.
Come on, man. This is Tennessee. Can you imagine? You get back from the monster truck and tractor rally, and then you're in trouble. And then they're in trouble for something you said, about Iraq.
Yep. I think all of these, so much I should say, of these charges of Islamophobia in the United States are predicated on the assumption that there really isn't any jihad, and that people don't have any reason to be suspicious of Muslims in any circumstances. Obviously, there are a lot of Muslims that are ordinary folks who are not going jihad, but the idea that it's just racism or bigotry to be concerned about those who hold this ideology that is violent, aggressive, expansionist, supremacist, and so on. Well, it's naive at best.
Look, two little side notes here. One will be slightly off track, but only take like 2 seconds to answer. Damien said, "Can a guest in the Boom Boom Room be Michael Jackson?" Damien, we actually already recorded Muhammad Meets Michael Jackson with John McCrae starring as Michael Jackson. So that's already been recorded. So yes, it's just a matter of editing these videos. But someone else pointed out that Muhammad didn't always bathe much in the Hadith, and you could say, well, they're in a desert; they don't have a lot of stuff. But I mean, think about the smell, ladies and gentlemen. Going back to what we were just talking about, Muhammad, according to the Hadiths, would have sex with all 9 of his wives on the same day, and not take a shower not take a bath until he was totally finished. Now, can you imagine this creepy old guy, creepy old flabby Muhammad, climbs on top of one wife and has sex with her, and they're in this hot, boiling hot desert, and then so he has sex with one, then goes on to the next, then goes on to the next, then goes on to the next. Can you imagine by the time, if you're like wife number 9, can you imagine by the time he gets to you, all the fluids and everything all over, and it's like, my goodness. But can you imagine the smell? It would be disgusting. But if you were to say, wow, this guy smells like someone who just had sex with 9 women and girls and didn't take a bath yet,
and it's 100 degrees.
You'd be a disgusting Islamophobe, according to
exactly.
Huffington Post and Council on American Islamic Relations and everyone else.
Yep. All right, moving on to the UK, where there is never a shortage of stupid infidels. We have North Face, which is a sports clothing company, and there is their new model. Her name is Amira. You can see her, I think, David. Can you not? She is a niqabi. She is wearing the niqab and a very groovy North Face jacket. And this is the new North Face publicity campaign. She is wearing the athletic outdoor circular hybrid insulated jacket. And for all those niqabis who are big into camping and mountain climbing and outdoor activities of all kinds, she
ninjutsu?
She is sure to appeal. Now, the thing is, of course, there actually is a group, and they get a lot of publicity. What are they called now? The Wanderlust Women. A bunch of niqabbed Muslims Muslim women who actually are outdoorsy, and more power to them. I hope they have a wonderful time. But the idea that the North Face company is showcasing them when they're no doubt quite a small group, and it's not really that they're appealing to niqabis to buy outdoor clothing. They're virtue signaling to leftists who will buy North Face products because they think, oh, these people are not Islamophobic and they're diverse and multicultural, and so on.
Yeah, I would have to say the timing is it. With me, it's the timing, right? If you want to, I mean, there are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. Roughly half of those are women. So obviously, you want to sell jackets to that market and to anyone, as you pointed out, leftists and so on. But I mean, women in Iran right now are being raped and murdered for not wearing their headgear appropriately. So for me, it's like the timing. It's like, what do you mean now? Like now, women are being beaten, raped, and killed for not wearing appropriate headgear, and that's when you decide to make it your marketing selling point. That's kind of in poor taste, I would say.
Indeed so, sir. Also in the UK, our friend Shamima Begum is back in the news. You may remember Shamima Begum. She is the
we offered to take care of our kid back in the day. I recall.
Yeah, it's a shame she didn't take us up on that.
Wait, I remember she got pregnant like 3 or 4 times, and I
Yes,
remember the first.
I
I
think
think
that the
did they all die? I think they
I
all
think
their
so.
kids died.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sucks.
it's a shame. If we had been able to take in the child would be fine today. Probably. I mean, of course, nobody knows what would have happened, but nonetheless, we certainly wouldn't have had her in a jihadi hotspot.
No.
Shamima Begum was 15 years old. She went from the UK to Syria to join the Islamic State. ISIS had several children, as has been noted, and was, by some reports, deeply involved in some of the atrocities that ISIS committed, particularly enslaving infidel girls and exploiting them. Now, she is in a refugee camp in Syria and she wants to come back to Britain, and the British authorities have refused her. But she is continuing to pressure them to change their minds and let her in. And what's that guy's name? Sajid Sad. He used to be Home Secretary. Sajid Javid, something like that. Yeah, Sajid Javid. He said that he had seen the classified files on Shamima Begum, and he was absolutely certain that this was the right thing to do to not let her back into the country. But now the BBC has made a 10-part series all about Shamima Begum, a laudable, favorable portrait of who she is, how what a sweet girl she is, how she has suffered, how she ought to be able to come back home. What do you think of a 10-part series on Shamima Begum, David?
You know, I always have mixed thoughts on this because I always think, okay, some of these, like 15, 16-year-old girls and kids going off to, wage jihad and stuff like that. I think, I did a lot of stupid, idiotic stuff when I was a teenager. So, all in favor of second chances. But you'd have to really have some, I think, good reason to think that person has changed his or her positions during this
Mm-hmm.
time. And that it's not just, oh, we lost, let me come home to sit and wait for the next caliphate that springs up so I can run out and join them. But with, it's like it reminds me of like, I'm not for the death penalty. I would rather keep people locked up. But there are certain people where I'm not going to complain that you killed Ted Bundy. I'm just not, right? It's like, okay, all the messed up stuff he did, it's not I'm not going to be, running through the streets. Hey, don't kill Ted Bundy, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like that with them. It's okay. I think you can have different positions. Like, okay, this was her, country. It's kind of a weird technicality in that like her parents were from Bangladesh or something like that.
Yeah, I
But they
think
were able
so.
to put in a technicality to where that doesn't have to be her home country, and that her home
Mm-hmm.
country doesn't have to take her back. But anyway, the point is, I think you could be sensible and argue it either way. No, we do have to take her back, and we're just going to lock her up for the rest of her life, or judge her, or do sentence her to whatever. Or I think you can also make a rational case for, no, too bad, you are too messed up for us to not use this law to keep you out of the country. But the idea that you'd be like obsessed, we have to get this jihadi back. We have to get this ISIS terrorist back. We really have to, and we just need to keep shouting this from the rooftops. And no matter how many parts of this series we have to get in order to convince the population to bring this ISIS jihadi who did, as you pointed out, apparently some messed up stuff that maybe we don't even know about. We of all the people in the world that we could help, we have to help her. That's my idea, right? Like, again, I could get it, and it'd be great if we could help everyone. But if you're going to put all that effort into helping, why the freaking terrorists? Why is that the person that we have to spend all this time? Why not the victims of the terrorists, right? There are people in really bad parts of the world who are being terrorized by jihadis. You don't seem to care at all about them, but the actual terrorists, we need to get her. We need to do something about her. In other words, if I were to help someone, she'd be pretty far down the list. Is all I'm saying.
And I think Christian Hijab has a very good point here. I think they should interview some of the Yazidi girls and their experience in the podcast. And that's really what is the sticking point for me. I don't care if Shamima Begum keeps appealing to the British authorities and they keep deliberating. And I expect they'll let her in eventually because they're just that type. But what's with the BBC in this 10-part series? Clearly they love her. And I can give you a very easy analogy to make that clear. If it's not clear to everyone and they're thinking, no, this is just a matter of importance, it's a journalistic endeavor. Well, look, take my own case, and I'm sorry to make this personal, but it's really not a personal story. It's an example, I think, that stands up very well next to Shamima Begum's. I am barred from Britain because I oppose jihad violence, and they don't like that. And I understand that because they're afraid that Muslims would riot if I'm walking around in London, and they don't want Muslims to riot. And also they want to give the appearance of there being extremists on both sides. And so there's jihadis, and then there's me, as if there's remotely some connection or some analogy, even though I don't advocate or approve of any violence. But anyway, a few years back when the ban was about to be put in, this is actually 9 years ago now, I think, 2013, or 10 years ago, that is. Time has flown. I was up one night. I often have trouble sleeping, and I'm up one night. It's about 3 in the morning, and I'm doing some work, and I happened to see on Twitter that they were about to have a show that morning. I mean, it was already later in Britain anyway, 9 o'clock in the morning or something. And they said, in the next hour, we're going to be talking about whether Spencer and Pamela Geller should be banned from coming into the country. And so I saw this, and I tweeted back to them, look, you're having this show, and you didn't contact me. It would seem like just basic decency. You should allow me a say. No, I'm right here. And so they were kind of shamed into it, and I ended up being on the show. And this is the show where they asked me, what's your problem with the Quran? And I reeled off some of the problematic verses, and they had this imam there, and they asked him, well, what do you think about that? And he says, I don't know anything about that. That's his field. And it was classic. But the point is, there's no 10-part series about Geller and me, or about anybody else who opposes jihad. The BBC never had a 10-part series about Tommy Robinson, or anybody else who is out there trying to defend free societies. They only are showcasing people who are trying to destroy free societies. And that's the point, that it's very clear, whatever their journalistic pretensions may be, what side they're on.
And notice the parallel, right? What's the BBC concerned about? Is it concerned about people trying to silence all criticism of Muhammad and the Quran? People being willing to slaughter for that? Is that the concern? Or do we really need to get ISIS terrorists back in the country as quickly as possible? But notice the parallel between that and the guy from Tennessee. One group wants to indoctrinate kids with a bunch of Islamic stuff to put a positive spin on this to make these kids more likely to convert in the future, versus a guy who said, I didn't like the smell when I was in Iraq, and what people's priorities are. But the priorities of the media in general always seem to be make Islam and Islam and everything else that's associated with it as attractive as possible. And anyone who draws attention to why it's not as attractive as you're making it sound has to be squashed.
Yep. So in line with that, did you hear about the video game that the MIT people developed? You're going to love this, David. This is a video game called On the Plane. And it's a virtual reality role-playing game.
Oh, this is different from the one I heard. Yeah, go ahead.
This was developed by MIT researchers. And you can play 3 characters. There are 3 characters in this video game. And one of them is Sarah, a first-generation Muslim American of Malaysian ancestry who wears a hijab. The second character is Marianne, a white woman from the Midwest with little exposure to other cultures and customs. And the third one is a flight attendant. And those are the only ones you can play. And what you essentially do is stop Marianne, the white woman from the Midwest with little exposure to other cultures, from harassing Sarah, the poor hijabbed lady from Malaysia. Now, do you see any... Is this a video game you would buy, David, and play?
No, this doesn't sound like the most fun. I mean, Pong sounds way, way, way more entertaining than this. But I mean, just think about it, because it's the same thing over and over again, right? I mean, Robert, when you think of Islam and planes...
Yeah, I don't think of poor Malaysian hijabis being harassed. That's not the first image.
There are a few different scenarios you could put into a video game that would be more relevant, right? Like, I mean, someone trying to crash that plane into a building, someone trying to blow up that plane or something like that, and you get to either play the terrorist. I could think of some people who'd want to play that part. Or you could play the person who's trying to stop them and like crash the plane before they slaughter a bunch of people.
This actually sounds like a good game.
That'd be a good game, right? Can't do it because it's Islamophobic.
Yep. But this one you can play.
Even though it's like real life. Because I mean, keep in mind, notice, people have actually been in that situation. Hey, these guys are taking over this plane. What do we do? Right? Mm-hmm. You know, if you're the idea of that, you know, MIT game will help prepare people for when they actually encounter these scenarios. All right, well, I'd be significantly more concerned about someone trying to crash the plane I'm in and slaughter a bunch of people in the name of Allah. So why don't we prep for that one with our video game?
So here again, it's the same thing we were talking about earlier, that Islamophobia concerns in the U.S. are often predicated on the unspoken assumption that there really isn't any jihad. And so this poor woman is going to be harassed on this airplane. That's a shame. Nobody should be harassed. Nobody should be bothered. Nobody should go out and be mean to hijabis under any circumstances. But that's presented as if it's just some sort of gratuitous racism and bigotry, when the only reason why anybody has any problem with Islam at all and with any individual Muslim is because of jihad violence. And this is not, once again, to justify any kind of loutish or vigilante behavior. There's no justification. But the idea that these things just come out of the blue, that's crazy.
Yeah, Robert's already said it, and I just wanted to be as clear as possible. If there's some hijab-wearing Muslim woman on a plane who has not done anything, should not be harassed, and if someone starts harassing her for not based on anything this woman has done, you should. I would stand up for the hijab,
Absolutely.
The hijabi woman, and say, hey, this woman didn't do anything. This woman didn't do 9/11. This isn't the woman who did that stuff. So shut your mouth, lady. That's clear. But to make a video game out of it, my goodness.
Yeah, it's just.
Did they run out of video game ideas?
I bet this one was pretty high on their list.
We got Call of Duty. We got the World of Warcraft. What are we missing here? We need a game where some Karen is harassing a hijabi. That'll fly off the shelves. All the kids are going to want to play that.
These MIT guys are going to be millionaires, I know. Anyway, big story out of Minnesota. I'm sorry, is it Minnesota? Yeah, Minnesota. Hamlin University. I've never heard of the august Hamlin University before, but now everybody has heard of Hamlin University. This is where there was a professor, Erica Lopez Prater,